You're lying in bed, the lights are off, the room's gone quiet, and your body finally starts to let go. Your breathing slows down, your muscles loosen, your mind starts drifting somewhere soft and formless, the kind of place where thoughts stop making sense and start turning into something closer to a dream. And then it happens. Your whole body suddenly jolts, your legs kick out, your arms fly up like you're trying to catch yourself, your heart is pounding, and for one confused second you're wide awake again, gripping the mattress, absolutely certain that a moment ago you were falling. Not metaphorically falling, actually falling off a cliff, down a staircase, through the floor. Your brain was so sure of it that your body reacted like it was real, and then you just lie there, heart racing, slightly embarrassed even though nobody's watching, wondering what on earth just happened to you. If you've ever experienced this, you know exactly the feeling I'm talking about. And if you haven't, trust me, you will, because this happens to almost everyone at some point, often more than we even realize. So here's the big question. Why does your brain do this? Why, right at the exact moment you're supposed to be drifting peacefully into sleep? Does it decide to stage a small, terrifying emergency? The answer to this one goes a lot deeper than it's just a twitch. It touches on ancient survival instincts, glitches in how your brain checks in with your own body, and a theory that some scientists find genuinely unsettling because it suggests this falling sensation might be a kind of fossil, a leftover behavior from millions of years ago, still buried in your nervous system, quietly running in the background every single night. Let's get into it. First, let's actually name the thing. What you're experiencing has a real clinical name, a hypnic jerk, sometimes called a sleep start, sometimes a hypnagogic jerk. It's an involuntary muscle contraction that happens as you're transitioning from being awake into the earliest stage of sleep, and it is unbelievably common. Researchers who study sleep physiology estimate that somewhere between 60 and 70% of people experience these regularly, which means if you've never had one, you're actually in the minority. Here's the strange part though. It's not just a twitch. A twitch is small, isolated, forgettable. A hypnic jerk almost always comes packaged with something extra, a vivid sensory hallucination, usually the feeling of falling, sometimes a flash of a dream image like missing a step or stumbling off a curb, and sometimes even a jolt of sound, a loud snap or bang that seems to come from nowhere. Your body convulses and your mind manufactures a whole little story to explain why. That pairing is the real mystery here. Why would a random muscle spasm come with its own custom-built nightmare attached? The nervous system's confused handoff. To understand this, you have to understand what your brain is actually doing in the minutes before sleep. It's not flipping an off switch. It's more like handing off control from one system to another, the way a plane might switch from manual controls to autopilot. As you drift off, your brain gradually lowers your heart rate, slows your breathing, and this is the key part, begins relaxing your muscles into a kind of standby state. Some sleep researchers describe this transitional period as one of the most electrically chaotic moments in the entire sleep cycle. Your brain waves are shifting from the fast, active patterns of wakefulness toward the slower rhythms of early sleep, and in that shift, signals can misfire. One leading explanation is that your brainstem, specifically a structure involved in monitoring muscle tone and motor activity, briefly misreads the slowing of your breathing and heart rate as a sign that something is wrong. Almost like your body's internal warning system sees decreasing activity and interprets it for a split second as we are shutting down, rather than we are simply falling asleep. And when your brain thinks the body might be shutting down unexpectedly, it does what any good alarm system does. It fires off a jolt, a sudden burst of motor activity, basically trying to snap you back online just in case something's actually wrong. That's the twitch, but it still doesn't explain the falling part, the falling sensation, and why your brain chooses that specific story. Here's where it gets genuinely interesting. Your brain doesn't just send a random signal to your muscles and stop there. It also has to explain internally why that signal happened, and your brain is a phenomenal storyteller. It's constantly taking fragments of sensory data, some real, some not, and stitching them into a coherent narrative even while you're asleep. This is essentially the same machinery responsible for dreams in general. So when the sudden muscle jolt fires, your brain, which is already half shut down and drifting through hypnagogic imagery, needs a plausible reason for why your body just convulsed. And it turns out one of the most common internal explanations it reaches for is falling. Not flying, not being pushed, falling, specifically and often falling from a height. a number of researchers studying hypnagogic experiences, this strange sensory phenomena that occurs specifically in that in-between window of falling asleep, have noted that falling is one of the single most reported images people experience in this state, right alongside the sensation of floating or the classic feeling of a sudden noise. Your brain isn't picking this at random. It's reaching for one of the most primal, most universally understood physical sensations. A human body can experience the loss of support beneath you, which brings us to the theory that makes this whole thing a little more unsettling, the evolutionary leftover theory. Some researchers, particularly those working from an evolutionary psychology angle, have proposed something genuinely fascinating, that the hypnic jerk isn't a bug in your nervous system at all. It might be a feature, an old one, possibly a very old one. Think about how our early primate ancestors likely slept. Not in beds, not indoors, not on flat solid ground with four walls around them. Many theories about early hominid sleep suggest our ancestors rested in trees, up in branches, to stay safe from ground-based predators at night. If that's true, then falling asleep wasn't just a metaphor. It was a literal, physical risk. If your muscles relaxed too much, too fast, while you were perched up in a tree, you could genuinely fall and die. So, the theory goes, evolution may have built in a kind of safety check. A reflex that right at the moment your muscles start truly relaxing into sleep, triggers a sharp contraction, just in case that relaxation is actually the beginning of a fall. A built-in wait. Are we slipping system? Something to jolt you awake and grab the branch, so to speak, before you plummet. And your brain, according to this theory, still runs this exact same subroutine every single night, even though you're lying safely on a mattress, in a locked house, nowhere near a tree or a cliff, or any actual danger at all. The hardware just hasn't been updated. It's still checking for a threat that, for most of us, hasn't existed in millions of years. Some sleep scientists push back on this idea, and we'll get into that a little later, because it's genuinely one of the more contested parts of the story. But for now, sit with that idea for a second. That jolt you felt last night, the one that made your heart race and left you staring at the ceiling? Some researchers think that might be a message from an ancestor you never met, still trying to keep you from falling out of a tree that stopped existing for you a long, long time ago. Let's keep going. Okay, so we've got the twitch, we've got the falling story your brain tells itself, and we've got this evolutionary theory that frames the whole thing as an ancient tree-dwelling safety reflex. But here's where the story gets more layered, because it's not just one clean explanation. There are a few different forces that seem to make hypnic jerks more or less likely on any given night. And honestly, once you know them, you'll probably start noticing patterns in your own sleep. The stuff that makes it worse, if you've ever had a night where you got hit with 3 or 4 of these in a row, right when you were trying to fall asleep, there's a good chance it wasn't random bad luck. Certain conditions seem to reliably crank up the frequency and intensity of hypnic jerks. Caffeine late in the day is one of the big ones, since it keeps your nervous system in a slightly more activated state right when it's trying to power down, creating more friction in that handoff we talked about earlier. Stress and anxiety do something similar. Some researchers studying sleep onset have found that people under higher psychological stress report more intense and more frequent sleep starts, likely because a stressed nervous system is already primed to fire off alarm signals at the smallest provocation. Sleep deprivation is another major one. And this one's almost paradoxical. You'd think being exhausted would make you fall asleep smoothly, but an overtired nervous system is often a chaotic one. A 2011 study looking at sleep-related phenomena found that irregular sleep schedules and accumulated sleep debt were associated with a noticeable uptick in these kinds of involuntary movements during sleep onset. Basically, when your brain is exhausted and trying to shut down too fast, it's more likely to misfire during that transition, rather than gliding through it smoothly. Heavy exercise late in the evening can do it too, since your body's still processing elevated adrenaline and muscle activity right as you're trying to power everything down. So can an irregular sleep schedule in general. One night going to bed at 11, the next at 3 in the morning, which keeps your circadian rhythm and your sleep onset systems out of sync with each other. Put simply, anything that makes your nervous system more wound up, more alert, more on edge heading into sleep seems to make that misfire, that false alarm, more likely to go off. Okay, but here's the part where things get a little uncomfortable, because for the vast, overwhelming majority of people, hypnic jerks are completely harmless. They're a normal, well-documented part of human sleep physiology, no different than a stomach growling or a yawn. But there's a smaller category of cases where doctors pay closer attention, because sometimes what looks like an ordinary hypnic jerk is actually something else wearing the same disguise. Sleep specialists distinguish between isolated hypnic jerks, which are the totally normal occasional twitches most of us experience, and a condition where these movements become frequent, intense, and disruptive enough to genuinely interfere with someone's ability to fall or stay asleep night after night. In some of those cases, what's actually happening isn't a benign sleep start at all, but a different neurological phenomenon that only resembles one on the surface. This is one of the reasons doctors sometimes ask patients to track the frequency and pattern of these movements, because the line between harmless nightly quirk and something worth investigating isn't always obvious just from how it feels. There's also research connecting excessive, disruptive muscle jerks during sleep onset to certain underlying conditions, including some connected to nervous system function and even in some studied cases, to specific nutritional deficiencies affecting nerve and muscle signaling. None of this is meant to alarm you. If you get the occasional jolt a few nights a month, especially on nights you drank too much coffee or went to bed wound up from a stressful day, that's about as normal as it gets. But it's a reminder that the same reflex responsible for a mildly funny bedtime story can, in rarer cases, be a small signal worth paying attention to if it becomes constant, intense, or is genuinely keeping you from sleeping. And that uncomfortable little wrinkle connects to something bigger about the whole topic. This thing we treat as a quirky, almost funny bedtime glitch is actually sitting right at the intersection of ancient survival wiring and the messy, imperfect way your brain monitors your own body in real time. It's not just a twitch, it's your nervous system's alarm system, still running an ancient piece of software, occasionally producing false positives, and every once in a while hinting at something worth a second look. So let's go back to you, lying in bed, jolting awake with your heart pounding, absolutely convinced for one disoriented second that you were actually falling. What actually happened, as best as science can currently explain it, is this. Your brain was in the middle of a delicate handoff, powering down your muscles and your alertness bit by bit, when a structure deep in your brainstem briefly misread that natural slowdown as a threat. It fired a burst of motor activity to snap you back online just in case, and your mind, already halfway into the dream-generating machinery of sleep, needed an explanation for why your body just convulsed, so it reached for one of the oldest, most primal sensations a human nervous system can produce. The feeling of the ground disappearing beneath you, and maybe, just maybe, according to one of the more captivating theories out there, that specific sensation isn't random at all. Maybe it's an inherited alarm, built for a version of you that slept in branches, not beds, still quietly checking every single night to make sure you haven't slipped. You'll probably have another one of these soon, maybe tonight. And when it happens, when your body jolts and your heart pounds, and for a split second you're convinced you're falling through empty space, you'll know it's not really about tonight at all. It's a message being replayed from somewhere impossibly far back, from a version of you that doesn't exist anymore, still trying out of pure ancient habit to catch you before you hit the ground.